All right, so Camille, the pro-Hamas protester, college student. This guy apparently was here on a student visa. Some reports say that he already had a green card. He was a permanent resident here in the United States. If you haven't heard about this guy, look him up. I don't know too many details about him, but he was organizing some protests, some pro-Hamas protests in some college. He's a college student. It's his big thing. Now they found his ass and they're deporting him. They revoked his, whether it's a student visa or his green card, because of the shit he was saying. And he was, they're saying he was inciting violence and he was protesting. Some argue that he's protected under freedom of speech. Others argue that, hey, how are you going to come to the country as a foreigner, quote unquote foreigner, with a visa, green card, and then roll everyone up here in the country? In reality, I'm not too familiar. I don't really care about what happens in the Middle East so much, so I don't know too many details. I have to admit, this is one that kind of makes me think about things. I think it's important for us to protect speech, especially when it's speech that we don't agree with. Even if it's things that go against our beliefs, it's things, we still need to protect free speech. I think that's very important too. There's a fine line between fucking deporting someone because you didn't like what they were saying and protecting free speech. So obviously there's some limits to freedom of speech as long as you're not hurting anyone, as long as you're not interfering. I also think you should be protected and be able to say whatever the fuck you want, even if I don't agree with it. So the same way I'm protected to say all the shit that I say, the stupid things that come out of my mouth. You don't need to agree with it, right? It's just an opinion. And as long as I'm not hurting anyone, as long as I'm not threatening anyone, I think it's okay to be able to speak our mind. This is what gives us the ability to see things from a different perspective. And I think that if you're that close-minded, you really can't make an informed decision. Maybe that's my bad for not knowing too much about what's going on in other parts of the world. I think I know the essential stuff, and I'm honestly worried about the things that go on here, the things that affect my everyday life, the things that are going to affect my kids, the things that are going to affect my wife, the things that are going to affect my dad, right? That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the things that are going to affect this country. I could give a fuck less what other people, what other cultural, religious war people are fighting on the other side of another fucking continent. If the guy had a green card, if he was a legal permanent resident, part of me is okay with him saying whatever the fuck he wants to say. As long as he's not breaking the laws, I don't care what you say. I can make a decision to agree with it or not. Things like this go both ways, especially when we don't agree with it. People were getting canceled and accounts blocked for saying anything negative about the COVID vaccine. And I feel the same way now as I did back then. People should be free to speak their mind, to give their opinion, whether they're an expert or not, whether they're right or whether they're wrong, or most importantly, whether you agree with it or not. So that's my take on it. Now, here's another thing. Even though you're allowed to say whatever you want, and even though we have the freedom of speech, that doesn't mean that there's no consequence behind the shit that we say. So you might be free to say whatever the fuck you want, but there's going to be consequences, right? But you have to be willing to be okay offending people, and you have to be willing to be okay with getting offended and be able to have these conversations in the pursuit of truth. If not, how the fuck else are we gonna understand one another? Let me know what you guys think.